In 2020, Hong Kong's flagship airline Cathay Pacific carried just 582 passengers across its entire network in a single day. They lost $2.8 billion that year, they shut down their regional airline overnight, and approximately half of their pilots left. 5 years later, they've repaid every dollar, they've ranked number 3 in the world, and the economy cabin they're putting out right now has won Best in the World 2 years running. So let's go explore it and explore how Cathay got here. It's the Christmas period and we're at Heathrow Terminal 3. I'm taking Cathay Pacific CX250 back to Hong Kong. Self-check-in first, you walk up, scan your passport, print your boarding pass, and that's it. Today's aircraft is B-KPA, a Boeing 777-300ER, and she's been flying since 2007, which makes her about 18 years old at this point. But inside, everything has been completely redone. This is one of the 777s that has already been retrofitted, and I think that's actually one of the more interesting parts of this story, because the reason this cabin exists at all is not what you'd expect. We'll get to that later. But first, some history, because this airline has been around for around 80 years, and what happened to them over the last 5 only really makes sense if you know what came before. Cathay Pacific was founded in 1946 by 2 guys, Roy Farrell and Sidney D. Cansell. They'd both been military pilots during the war, and they started flying cargo around Asia with a single Douglas DC-3. The airline was registered in Hong Kong, and over the next 80 years, the two kind of grew up together, the city and the airline. You generally can't talk about one without the other. And actually, 2026 is their 80th anniversary. They've gone quite big on it. They've brought back the old lettuce leaf sandwich livery. It's now on an A350, a 74 freighter, and just recently, B-KPA, a 777-300ER has also gotten some special livery. But the reason Cathay became what it really wasn't really about the branding or the product, it was the geography. Hong Kong sits right at the intersection of China and everything else. For decades, if you were connecting between Asia and the West, you were almost certainly passing through Hong Kong, and you were almost certainly flying Cathay. They had a natural position as the gateway, and they built an entire airline around it. Over the years, the group got bigger. They've held a stake in Dragonair, the regional carrier connecting Hong Kong and mainland China to the rest of Asia, and then took full control of it in 2006. Dragonair got rebranded to Cathay Dragon in 2016, and between the two airlines, they basically had the whole region covered. By 2010, the group was posting record numbers, 14 billion in profit, which comes out to about 1.8 billion US dollars. And the recognition matched. Cathay won Skytrax's World's Best Airline 4 times. In 2003, 2005, 2009, and 2014. No other airline has done that, not Emirates, not Singapore Airlines. And even their lounges were famous. The Wing, the Pier, with day beds, a la carte dining, the works. First class was 6 private suites. So the product genuinely backed up the reputation. But underneath all that, there was a vulnerability that wasn't obvious at the time. A huge part of Cathay's business depended on mainland China. That connection to China was Cathay's greatest asset. And in 2019, it became a serious problem. Though not the only one, the bigger blow was still coming. In the summer of 2019, Hong Kong saw months of protests. I'm not going to go into the politics of it here, but basically, over 1,200 Cathay employees participated in demonstrations at the airport. Flights were cancelled and Beijing was not happy. China's Aviation Authority, the CAAC, responded by saying that any Cathay staff who had supported the protests would be banned from operating flights involving mainland China. The CEO resigned, 28 employees were fired, profits dropped 28% that year. That was 2019. What came in 2020? Well, COVID, as you know. Borders started closing around the world, and this is where Cathay's situation was different from almost every other major airline. Most big airlines have a domestic market to fall back on. United has a coast-to-coast flight across America, Qantas has the whole of Australia. When international borders shut, those airlines could still fly domestically and keep some revenue coming in. Cathay, though, is based in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is 427 square miles. There are no domestic routes unless you want to fly to Kai Tak. When borders closed, Cathay literally had nowhere to fly. To make it worse, Hong Kong maintained some of the strictest border restrictions on earth. Strict quarantine rules limited flights, the works, well into 2022. Other hubs like Singapore reopened much faster, while Hong Kong stayed essentially shut. 92 aircraft ended up in storage in the Australian outback. Some of them sat there for 4 years. Daily passengers numbers went from around 100,000 to at one point in April 2020, 582. The full year loss was 2.8 billion, the worst in Cathay's history. Then came the restructuring. In October of 2020, Cathay announced that 8,500 positions would be eliminated. 5,900 were actual layoffs, the rest were unfilled roles that were cut from the books. It was the biggest mass layoff Hong Kong has seen in 3 decades. And Cathay Dragon, the regional airline they have been building for 35 years, was shut down completely, overnight. Approximately 1,000 pilots were made redundant overnight. The remaining crew were then offered new contracts with pay cuts, ranging from around 20 to 60% depending on the role. Most signed, about 98.5% of pilots and 92% of cabin crews, but over the months that followed, roughly 1,000 pilots resigned anyways, largely because of those pay cuts and broader uncertainty. A few months before all this, in June of 2020, Hong Kong government had stepped in with a $5 billion USD rescue package. It was the first time the government had ever directly invested in a private company, and without that money, Cathay would have ceased to exist. Before we get into how they came back, let's have a look at what the product actually looks like today. The seat is a complete refresh, new cushions, new headrests. Pitch is around 31 to 32 inches and the seat width is around 17.5, which is standard for a 10 abreast 777. The screen is big, sharp, 4K, and it supports Bluetooth, so you can use your own headphones. The entertainment system is honestly one of the best I've used in economy. Massive library, hundreds of movies and TV shows refreshed regularly. On the day flight to London, I watched about 10 hours of content and still had a list of things I wanted to get to. CX250 is actually one of the routes that gets the Aria suite business class every day, so there's a premium product up front on this exact flight, but let's talk about that in a bit. So how did Cathay actually come back? It wasn't one thing, it was actually a few things happening at once. First, borders finally opened. Hong Kong dropped its strict quarantine rules in late of 2022. Passenger demand flooded back quick, and by January of 2025, Cathay had restored 100% of its pre-pandemic flight capacity, connecting Hong Kong to around 100 destinations. Second, cargo. Hong Kong has been one of the world's busiest international cargo airport for 13 of the last 15 years, and Cathay Cargo is the biggest operator out of the hub. In 2024, cargo tonnage was up 11% year-on-year, driven heavily by e-commerce from China. And alongside all of this, Hong Kong Express, Cathay's low-cost subsidiary, was growing aggressively under them, adding routes across Asia and operating at 180% of pre-pandemic capacity. So the group wasn't just recovering Cathay Pacific, they were building out a second brand at the same time. Third, costs. Fuel prices dropped 9% year-on-year, which is significant for any airline. And on top of them, as both passenger and cargo's volume grew, Cathay was able to spread its fixed costs over a much wider range. The result was pretty striking. In 2023, Cathay posted an operating profit of 15.1 billion Hong Kong dollars, which is around 1.9 billion US. They repaid the entire government bailout, all 5 billion of it, plus nearly 4 billion in preference share dividends over the holding period. At Skytrax 2025, they were ranked number 3 airline in the world, up from number 8 just 2 years earlier. Best economy class for the second year running, best in-flight entertainment, and just in 2026 on Valentine's Day, Cathay carried over 100,000 passengers in a single day. But the comeback wasn't just about the numbers recovering. What I find more interesting is what they did with the actual product. So here's the thing about Cathay Economy that I think gets overlooked in most reviews. The seat is good, the screen is great, fine. The small things between the seatbelt sign turning off and landing is where they really shine. The food is genuinely good for economy. I know every airline says that, but Cathay has consistently been above average in my opinion, and the refresh hasn't changed that. But other than the meals, we have egg tarts, Hong Kong style egg tarts, warm, and they just keep bringing them. There isn't a one per customer situation. You want 3? Have 3. They're proper egg tarts. Cup noodles, available anytime during the flight. Just ask the cabin crew for one. It's a small thing, but if you've ever been on a 12-hour flight and woken up hungry, you'll understand why it matters. Drinks are free flow for the entire flight, juice, beer, wine. No limit, no tokens, and the crew just don't make you feel weird about it. Oh, and a quick side note, if you got an iPhone, you can actually get a surprisingly decent photo of the stars using long exposure and night mode. I got this somewhere over the Middle East. And all this, by the way, is available for fares that might surprise you. I paid around £650 return in the summer for London and Hong Kong. Cathay also does a 10% student discount, which brings it even lower. I think that's what makes the Skytrax Best Economy thing actually true in practice. It's not just an award on the wall. None of it is one big flashy thing. It's a lot of small things done consistently well, and you notice it on a long flight when you've got 12 hours to actually experience the service rather than just the comfortable seat. Okay, so here's the part of the story I find most interesting, and it's about this specific cabin. Why does it even exist? Because this wasn't even the plan. Back in 2013, Cathay ordered 21 Boeing 777-9s, the next generation wide-body from Boeing, bigger, more efficient, longer range, and it was supposed to be Cathay's new flagship. Original delivery date was 2021. What year is it now? 2026. All the new cabin products, the business class, the premium economy, the economy refresh, were designed for the 777-9. Boeing delayed, and delayed. The 777 is still not certified, and current best case estimate is 2027, so what do you do when the aircraft that's supposed to carry your airline into the future is 6 years late and counting? You take the cabins designed for it and you put them on what you've got. That's how we ended up with the Aria suite being installed on 777-300ERs rather than the 777-9. And if you actually didn't know the backstory, you had no idea that this was a retrofit. It just feels like a modern cabin. They're rolling it out across the 777-300ER fleet and plan to have every one of them done by the end of 2027. And then there's the A330-900neos. Cathay has 30 of them in order, and they're going to handle the regional and medium haul network. The A330neos as well as the current A330s are also getting a major upgrade on their business class and a refreshed economy. And then there's the first class. Cathay is developing something called the Halo Suites, an entirely new first class product, but it's designed exclusively for the 777-9, and because that doesn't exist yet, there's no aircraft to put it on. The total investment across fleets, cabins, lounges, and digital is over 100 billion Hong Kong dollars. This isn't an airline in maintenance mode, this is an airline rebuilding itself from the ground up. When Cathay Dragon was still operating, there was an order for 32 Airbus A321neos. All 32 were originally intended for Dragon. They were spec'd as a regional aircraft for short hops around Asia, tight legroom, recliner business class, not a flat bed. That made sense for a regional subsidiary, running 2 or 3 hour flights. Then in October of 2020, Dragon was shut down overnight. The 16 aircraft that were meant for Dragonair and the other 16 for HK Express got absorbed into mainline Cathay Pacific instead. But the configuration stayed the same. So now you've got an aircraft that was designed for a regional subsidiary wearing Cathay Pacific liveries and carrying Cathay Pacific expectations. The mismatch has not gone unnoticed. Aviation reviewers picked up on the tight legroom, and fair enough. On the short haul to Bangkok is probably fine, but not to Kuala Lumpur or Tokyo. But here's where it gets interesting because Cathay actually listened. They've announced a pretty significant revamp of the entire A321neo fleet. They're removing economy seats to increase legroom across the cabin, relocating the toilets to ahead the rear doors to make them bigger, and updating the seat colors from the old Cathay Dragon Red to something more in line with the Cathay Green, upgrading the IFE and improving the meal service. It's generally rare for an airline to remove seats on the airplane, and I think it says a lot about where Cathay's head is at right now. They've been very publicly leading into being a customer first over the past year or two, and the A321neo revamp is probably the clearest example of that. It's worth quickly mentioning the A350. It's actually been a pretty important aircraft for Cathay over the past decade. They took delivery of their first A350-900 in 2016, and the larger A350-1000 followed in 2018, which at the time launched their Washington DC route, their longest in the network. They've now got 48 A350s in total across both variants, making them one of the largest A350 operators in the world. I actually flew back to London on the A350-900 and it's a lovely aircraft. Stay tuned for that trip report. And then for cargo, Cathay has 6 A350 freighters on order, which will eventually replace their aging 747s. So where does all this go from here? I think there are a few things worth watching. The fleet plan is pretty clear: 35 Boeing 777-9s for the long haul, 30 A330neos for regional and medium haul, 6 A350 freighters for cargo, and all this adds up to over 100 billion Hong Kong dollars in total investment. And then there's the airport itself. I think it's actually underappreciated as part of this story. Hong Kong's 3-runway system was officially commissioned in November 28, 2024. The whole project involved reclaiming 650 hectares of land, roughly the size of the whole Gibraltar Airport, building a new 3,800-meter runway, expanding Terminal 2 into a full-service terminal. It cost 141.5 billion Hong Kong dollars, which was completed on schedule and on budget. And for Cathay, this is the physical infrastructure that makes all of these fleet orders actually usable. You can buy as many planes as you want. If the airport can't handle it, it doesn't matter. Whether the new runway infrastructure combined with Cathay's expansion and HK Express growing underneath them is enough to close that gap and restore Hong Kong's hub status, or whether the center of gravity in Asian aviation has shifted towards Singapore and the Gulf is probably one of the single biggest questions hanging over Cathay. What Cathay went through is something that should have ended them, and what came out the other side is an airline you genuinely want to fly on. If you're looking at booking a flight to or through Hong Kong, I think you're in pretty good hands. This video was not sponsored by Cathay. So have you flown Cathay recently? I'd be curious to what you thought. Let me know in the comments, subscribe if you want more of these documentary styles, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.